Sally Carpenter Hale, and I will be your moderator for the debate. I am a member of the League of Women Voters, a 102-year-old nonpartisan organization dedicated to voter education. Today's debate is hosted by the 4 leagues from the 3rd Congressional District: Clark, Lewis, Cowlitz, and Klickitat-Skamania. And joining us today is Nancy Halverson, president of the Clark County League. Nancy, thank you. Here she is. Thanks, Nancy. Sponsoring the debate are 5 newspapers from the district: the Chronicle in Centralia, the Columbian in Vancouver, the Daily News in Longview, the Chinook Observer in Ilwaco, and the Skamania County Pioneer in Stevenson. Questions were submitted by the newspapers and the public and were edited by the League to remove any bias. We received many more questions than we have time for, and we thank everyone who took the time to submit one. Representatives from 4 of the newspapers are here today and will be asking the questions. From the Chronicle, Isabel Vanderstoep, who is a government and community news reporter. She grew up in Lewis County and studied communications at Western Washington University before returning to Centralia to highlight the issues and people of her home. From the Columbian, Lauren Ellen Becker, who covers the Vancouver City Government, federal agencies, and Veterans Affairs. The paper has a news staff of 31, the largest in Southwest Washington, and is primarily circulated throughout Clark County. From the Daily News, Brennan Kaufman, who covers races for Congress and city council meetings in Cowlitz County. Brennan wrote for the Post-Register in Idaho before moving to Kelso last year. And from the Skamania County Pioneer, Philip Watness, who has been the editor, reporter, and photographer there for the past 11 years. He has spent 3 decades in journalism, previously working for the Port Townsend Leader Weekly, the Peninsula Daily News, and the Olympian Daily. The Chinook Observer could not be with us today, but editor and publisher Matt Winters has submitted questions that will be asked by the other panelists. Members of Congress are elected to 2-year terms. Among other duties, the representatives introduce bills and resolutions, offer amendments, and serve on committees. The 3rd Congressional District stretches from Clark County north to Lewis County and from Pacific County on the coast to Skamania County in the east. The district also includes Wahkiakum County and a portion of Thurston County. Jamie Herrera Butler served 6 terms representing this district in Congress before being defeated in the primary election. Democrat Marie Gluesenkamp Perez and Republican Joe Kent are competing to fill this seat. We thank both the candidates for their participation in this event, and special thanks to CVTV for hosting it. We are live on air and on CVTV and TVW and streaming online at cvtv.org. We'd like to remind the audience that they are not allowed to react in any way to comments or responses from the candidates. No applauding, no cheering, no booing, and no gesturing, please. And if you haven't already, please silence your cell phones now. The candidates received and agreed to the ground rules and debate format in advance. Both will be asked the same questions. They will first answer in the order that their names appear on the ballot, and we will rotate after that. The candidates each will have 60 seconds to answer the opening and closing questions. For all the questions asked by the panel, they will have 90 seconds to respond. Then the first candidate to answer will have the opportunity to make a 30-second rebuttal. Candidates, please watch the league timers and stay within the timelines for each question. Remember, we are on a tightly scheduled live television program. And as a reminder, we will not allow attacks of a personal nature. We're here this afternoon to learn about your positions on the issues and your qualifications. So let us begin. I will ask the first question, and then we'll turn them over to the newspapers. Why are you the better candidate for this position? You have 60 seconds to respond. Candidate Perez.
I'm Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. I run an auto repair and a machine shop with my husband. I work in the trades and I fix things for a living. I know what it takes to run a small business. I'm running for Congress to be an independent voice for Southwest Washington. I'm not running to be a cheerleader for any political party. And I'm not running to divide our country. I'm running to fix what's actually broken in our economy. And that means you, the voter, can vote, have a clear choice in this election. You can vote for me, a small business owner, or you can vote for Joe Kent, an extreme politician. Judge for yourself how extreme Joe Kent is. He supports a national ban on abortion with no exceptions. He wants to defund the FBI. He wants to abolish mail-in voting. He continues to celebrate the violent rioting mob that attacked our Capitol on January 6th. When Joe Kent says these things, believe him. This is who he is and what he's going to do. And a vote for Joe is a vote for even more chaos and disorder, and that's the last thing we can afford.
Candidate Kent.
Yeah, hi, I'm Joe Kent. Had the honor of serving this country for a little over 20 years, did 11 combat deployments and special operations in the intelligence community. It was the greatest honor of my life. I intended to continue to serve in that capacity until my late wife, who was also in the military, was tragically killed fighting ISIS in Syria 1 month after we were supposed to be out of there. Her death is a direct result of the failings of policy of our corrupt ruling class. So I came back here to the Pacific Northwest to concentrate on raising my children. I got a job immediately as a program manager in a technology company. And then ever since then, I've watched our country continue to decline. Right now, because of one-party rule in Washington, D.C., our economy is being decimated. 1 month of wages will be stolen from you this year. Crime is running rampant thanks to our open southern border, thanks to Democrat politicians opening prisons and letting child killers go. Our children are being sexualized in the schools. This situation's out of control. I will go to Washington, D.C. to be a check on Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, and one-party rule. Thank you.
The next question begins the 90-second answers and will be asked by Brennan Kaufman of the Daily News.
Do you support continuing national health care programs such as Medicare, Medicaid, and the Affordable Care Act for your constituents? If you do, why, and how could those programs be improved and made more cost-effective? If you don't, why not? And what would you support instead to ensure that Americans can access affordable health care?
Candidate Kent.
So right now the problem with healthcare is that we've had too much federal government control. Now obviously the programs for senior citizens or people with disabilities, those must maintain. We have to take care of the people who need our assistance and people who've paid into the system. But the one provider coming from the federal government, that has gotten us absolutely nowhere. If you remember the last time the Democrats said that they were going to fix healthcare, it was when Barack Obama said that if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. We need more competition on the market. We need tort reform. We need to make it possible to purchase pharmaceuticals from places like Canada, places like Europe, without having a ton of red tape managed by big pharma and a few different healthcare conglomerates driving up all the prices. So at the end of the day, we need more competition in the market. That's going to overall benefit the individual consumers while maintaining at the same time the safety net for senior citizens and those who are disadvantaged.
Candidate Perez.
You know, we pay some of the highest healthcare costs in the world, and we have not the highest outcomes. We've got to do better. All Americans deserve access to quality, affordable healthcare. We've got to control the healthcare costs. Some of the ways that we can do that, we've got to be negotiating all of the Medicare drug costs, not just the 13 drugs covered in the IRA. We've got to be speeding the access and delivery of generic drugs to market. That means that we've got to pursue patent reform. You know, a lot of big pharma is just marrying an existing drug with a new delivery technology and calling it something new. That's not delivering value for American consumers. That's delivering high profits to big corporations. And that's one of the reasons I don't take corporate PAC checks, because I want to be an independent voice for Southwest Washington and our own healthcare. I also believe that value-based healthcare systems have proven really effective. When you have access to ongoing, continuous preventative care, overall our healthcare costs go down. One of the ways that we can do that is by cutting out the red tape that is holding up nurse practitioners from delivering the health care that we rely on. A lot of these people are highly trained individuals who, with minimal oversight, could be prescribing drugs to patients. In rural communities where there is a wild inequity and a lack of access to medical care, we have got to be supporting novel approaches to bringing down the cost of health care to provide better benefits for all Americans.
Candidate Kent, do you want to rebut?
Yeah, so managing healthcare from the federal government, especially by the Democrat Party, Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi, has been a disaster for this country. The last thing we need is more federal intervention coming from Washington, D.C. We need more competition on the market. That's what's actually going to drive down the prices and start to cut in to the major medical conglomerates and into big pharma. Remember what the Democrats and Obama and Biden and Pelosi have done with your healthcare. We must prevent that.
Now we'll hear from Lauren Ellenbecker of the Columbian.
Washington's 3rd Congressional District borders the Pacific Ocean and includes at least 6 rivers, a national forest, a national monument, and at least 2 national wildlife refuges. Do you have goals to protect those natural resources and to ensure the survival of related industries, such as timber, fishing, and recreation? If so, what specific actions would you take?
Candidate Perez.
I come from a proud line of loggers 5 generations deep in Washington state. I believe that our natural resources should be that. They should be a natural resource. Right now we've seen skyrocketing timber prices, lumber prices in our country. When we look at the quality of our woods, we see, frankly, a disaster. We have wildfire seasons every year. We have not proactively managed our woods to be an asset. They are a liability. I think we are all familiar with this situation, right? We spend a month or more every summer locked in our houses with air filters running because the air quality outside rivals that of Beijing. We've got to be doing more to clean up our woods to ensure that it is a asset to our natural environment as well as a asset to our builders and our logging industry. We've got to be supporting our native industries. I think that one of the things that we should be doing is doing more to support our timber and cardboard and renewable paper industries and replacing plastic packaging with our native sustainable timber. I know that I've spent a lot of time talking about timber because that's my family background, but the same goes for supporting our fisheries and shell fisheries. These are pivotal industries to so many small rural communities, and we've got to be doing more to support those industries and ensure that they're there in future generations.
Candidate Kent.
Yes, the timber industry is what brought my family here. My dad was a forest ranger. I was an Eagle Scout. I grew up in these woods. An absolute tragedy has taken place at the altar of environmentalism. If you look at the policies that the Democrats have enacted, the Green Agenda has enacted, killing off our timber industry, and now every summer the wildfires rage and our timbers burn. Very little timber is actually harvested from our forest to provide for the communities as they did for generations. What little we do actually harvest, it doesn't even go into mills in the community anymore. Those have been shipped overseas at the altar of globalism. So what we need to do is push these resources down to be managed at the lowest possible level. I trust the people that have been earning a living in the forests and the rivers to accurately and responsibly manage the resources more than I trust the federal government, because the federal government has completely and totally mismanaged it. Thanks to government bureaucrats, right before the salmon run, the biggest weekend we were supposed to have was Labor Day weekend. That cost the district a lot of money because government bureaucrats shut down the salmon run because they refused to update their systems. And as a result, the district lost millions of dollars from people coming in for fishing guides and then all the different hotels and restaurants up and down the gorge. And that's because of government overregulation. So we need to push down these authorities and these resources down to the lowest level. Counties like Skamania, counties like Lewis that actually produce a good deal of timber, they should be able to fund their local government with the proceeds from that timber.
Candidate Perez, rebuttal.
In my county, Skamania County, 80% of employed people are employed outside of the county. There is a terrible lack of jobs, and it's not realistic to say that we're all going to go from these natural resource jobs to serving cocktails on a golf course, right? We've got to protect the family wage jobs that these industries can generate, but we've got to do it with an eye to the future and the long-term value of these assets, not the short-term profit sharing or profit mongering, right? We've got to be supporting the long-term health of our woods.
Next up is Philip Watness of the Skamania County Pioneer.
Hello, Joe and Marie. Thanks for being here and trying to serve your country. Do you support the bipartisan effort of Northwest congressional members, including Senator Patty Murray and Representative Kathy McMorris Rogers, to persuade President Biden to prioritize the renegotiation of the Columbia River Treaty? Why or why not?
Candidate Kent.
Well, to specifically answer that, I'd have to look at the treaty right in front of me. So I don't think I can give a accurate comment on that right now.
Candidate Perez.
Maintaining energy prices, maintaining an eye and a relationship with our partners in Canada, that is a critical element. And renewable energy is something that we have a proud history of in Washington State. We've got it right now is not the time to be taking renewable energies off of our balance sheet. We need to have a broad availability of different power systems. And so, yes, we need to be proactively negotiating these treaties.
Candidate Kent, I'm guessing no rebuttal to that.
Yeah, my starting point would be, is it a good deal for the people in the district? Is it going to lower our energy costs? Is it going to give us more control over the resources in our district? That's my starting point, is putting us first and not any kind of treaty that puts the people of the district in a disadvantaged position for something like a conversion to green energy.
Now for Isabel Vanderstoep of the Chronicle.
The 3rd Congressional District has experienced both dangerous wildfires and extreme temperatures in recent years. What do you propose to do in Congress to help your constituents prepare for and mitigate natural disasters specific to rising sea levels, wildfires, shrinking salmon runs, and flooding?
Candidate Perez.
Yeah, my house almost burned down in the Eagle Creek wildfire a few years ago. That was right after we finished building our house. We loaded up the truck with all the power tools we used to build it. That's something you don't forget. So climate change is real. It's something that affects all of us. It affects rural communities in different ways that need to be reflected in legislation. And I think the reality is that we need a broad-scale reevaluation of what a green job is. A green job is not just somebody running a recycling plant. It is an electrician wiring in a heat pump. It's the trades jobs, right? It's a mechanic stopping an oil leak from going into the river. It's an insulator putting spray foam insulation in your house. Trades jobs are green jobs, and we've got to be supporting more adoption and more support for green jobs going forward. And that's why I support policies like the adoption of federal Pell Grants to be available for people pursuing apprenticeships in the trades. When we say we respect work and we value the trades, let's put our money where our mouth is. Let's support kids going into those careers. I have actionable steps because this is what I've done with my life. I work in the trades not because I wanted to run for office or I think it's a good talking point, but because I believe in the nobility of fixing things. I believe that work is inherently noble, and we need to be doing more to address the climate crisis and supporting the trades jobs that are going to navigate it out of that. I'm pro-renewable energy because I'm pro-business. Cheap, reliable energy, that's what our businesses need to continue to manufacture quality goods.
Candidate Kent.
So I support conserving our natural resources. What we can't do is continue down the same path that Biden, Pelosi, and Jay Inslee have taken us down with this rapid conversion to so-called green energy, because the green energy is by and large produced in countries that absolutely hate us, like the Chinese Communist Party. They're the ones that have all the raw earth minerals for the electric vehicles, et cetera. So bills that Biden and Pelosi and my opponents support are nothing but a payday for the Chinese Communist Party. And at the same time, while they're harvesting those resources under the banner of green energy, their carbon footprint is 10 times what it would be here in the United States. So number one, we have to be energy independent. That's also going to drive down the inflation that's absolutely crushing people. Bring back our own manufacturing so we can control the environmental regulation of these critical industries. And they're not in China, they're not in India, but they're also providing good U.S. jobs here. Also, to manage our wildfires, to manage our natural resources, we must ensure that we never let someone like Joe Biden or Jay Inslee force a vaccine mandate that takes people's jobs away from them. Right now, if the wildfires wildfires that are raging, there are firefighters who can't get out there and put out the fires because they've been fired for not taking the vaccine. So we absolutely cannot continue to go down this path saying that we're conserving our resources while putting our workers last and while putting foreign governments to absolutely despise us and their workers first.
Candidate Perez, rebuttal.
That's a fundamental misunderstanding of our natural resources. We actually have all the natural materials here to make solar panels at home. We've abdicated that not because of some conspiracy around China, but because we've failed to support native industry. We have the natural resources. We have lithium. We have many of these materials. What we've lacked is an investment in career and trade and entrepreneurship to grow those native industries at home. And I agree, we've got to bring that home. We've got to bring manufacturing of solar panels back to the U.S.
Brennan will ask the next question.
Earlier this month, President Biden announced he was pardoning all prior federal offenses of simple possession of marijuana and urged state governors to follow suit. He also set in motion a review of how marijuana is classified under federal law, which currently is the same as heroin and LSD and higher than fentanyl and methamphetamine. Do you support these moves at the federal level? Why or why not?
Candidate Kent.
Yeah, I have no issues with what Biden did with decriminalize or taking away the people that were the felonies from the folks that were in jail because of just simple possession of marijuana. I think it's a state's issue, and right here in Washington State, we've made cannabis legal, so I support that. I think that we should be looking at, from the federal perspective, looking at what THC and CBD and those types of things can do for veterans. Same thing with a couple other different kinds of drugs to care for our veterans. So I support that. I mean, it's a little hypocritical coming from the Biden administration, considering how many people Kamala Harris locked up for simple marijuana possession, but I guess it's a good start.
Candidate Perez.
You know, from a financial perspective, I do think it's the right call to decriminalize federally possession of marijuana. That has been a huge waste of resources to keep people in prison who are not violent offenders. But I think it's important that we follow the science on this. I think when we have, right, marijuana is not what it was, you know, when my parents were young, right? The levels of THC have gone through the roof. I think it's important that we have more of a scientific understanding of what that does to our communities and our kids, people using it. I think that it's important that we have a middle of the road, but understanding. But I do think it's the right move to federally decriminalize simple possession of marijuana.
Candidate Kent, rebuttal.
No.
Okay. Next up is Lauren.
The prices of basics such as food and gas have skyrocketed. For instance, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reported in September that over the last 12 months, grocery prices rose more than 13% and gas went up over 25%. What can Congress do to help 3rd District residents survive in this economy in the short term and help bring those prices down over time?
Candidate Perez.
I think there are 3 primary lenses that we need to address inflation through. I think the first one is the insane labor shortage that we're all facing. I think it's actually a good thing for the American worker that we have low unemployment. People are getting higher wages. Employers are having to compete and provide better conditions for their employees. I think that's a good thing that American workers have more money in their pocket. I think we need to understand why that's happening, though. Why do we have a labor shortage? I think we need to address, one, as a working mom and a small business owner, let me tell you one clue, one big red flag. 1 in 10 child care facilities have shut down since 2019 permanently. Child care costs are like $15,000 a year per kid, right? A lot of people are staying home from the workforce because they can't afford to work. So we need to increase access to child care. One of the ways we can do that is by providing public service debt forgiveness for people who are teaching our under 6 crowd, just like we do for public educators of the over 6-year-old crowd. I think that's one step we can make towards easing our labor restrictions. In the context of inflation, though, I'd like to say that Joe Kent's plan to ban all legal immigration for 20 years is economic sabotage. When we talk about expensive grocery prices, you ban all agricultural legal work permits, the price of groceries are going to go through the roof. That's how we end up with $40 cranberry sauce on the kitchen table, right? We've got to have, and that's why so many people in the agricultural industry are supporting me, because they know it's economic sabotage. We also need to address supply chain issues. That's my time.
Candidate Kent.
Yeah, the reason why inflation's out of control right now, number one, day one of Biden's administration, he killed off U.S. energy. Everybody remembers what gas prices were just 2 years ago. That drove this cycle of inflation. That's what started 1 month of your wages being stolen this year. The Democrats then continued to spend money. Most recently, the Inflation Reduction Act, so-called Inflation Reduction Act that my opponent here says that she would support, that gives 87,000 more IRS agents to come after people making under $100,000 per year, at the same time increasing new domestic taxes on domestic oil production, energy production. So that's going to continue this cycle of inflation off the charts. The Democrats continue to spend trillions and trillions of dollars that we didn't need with the American Recovery Act, Build Back Better, et cetera. These are all things that Biden and Pelosi pushed. This cycle of inflation, of reckless spending, is what's driving all of the inflation costs. What I can do on day one is I can caucus with other Republicans, and we can threaten to withhold the federal budget until Biden turns back on U.S. energy. That will give the American people some instant relief. After that, it's being fiscally responsible. We cannot continue to spend billions and trillions of dollars on programs we don't need, and we're sending money to countries that hate us, that we don't need to be involved in. That will absolutely tighten up the budget. As far as immigration goes, I want to ban economic immigration. If a visa takes a job away from an American citizen, we must prioritize Americans. My opponent will say that I'm racist for saying so, but I want to put American workers first because I think it's our obligation to provide good paying jobs for our people.
Candidate Perez, rebuttal?
You know, we all recognize that we need to increase energy production. That's one of the primary components of all of our market-based goods, of all of our labor, right? And that's one of the reasons, you know, he says that Biden's trying to kill off oil and gas. Biden actually issued more permits for oil and gas drilling in 2021 than Trump did in
I'd like to
his
remind the
entire
audience to be
career,
quiet.
His entire tenure. But we've got to rebuild our supply chains. We've got to rebuild American manufacturing. And stop.
Okay. Now we'll hear from Philip.
Hi. Social Security provides a lifeline to many constituents in this district. Do you support changing eligibility requirements to receive Social Security? If so, what specific changes would you make? And if not, why not?
Candidate Kent.
Yeah, we have to maintain Social Security for those who are on it and those who are approaching it. That's a system they've already paid into. The government owes them that money. What we have to do, though, is that make sure that the government stays financially responsible enough to continue to meet its obligations. The way that Biden and Pelosi, the way that they're driving this economy, Social Security will go insolvent very, very soon. That's because there's no individual savings Social Security account for any of us, really. It just goes into the government slush fund of reckless spending. So we have to actually specifically allocate how much money is going into Social Security based off the exact same math calculations that you do with your family every single day. We have this many people on Social Security. They're going to need these benefits. We have this much federal tax dollars to play with. As we age, we're going to have to look at the folks that are a little bit younger and take care of a new system that doesn't just give the government blanket amounts of money without any way to safeguard the individuals, the money that they're putting into that Social Security account.
Candidate Perez.
Yeah, you know, Joe Kent had to take that phrase off his website. He used to say that we're going to increase the age at which people can access Social Security. He softened that because he knows that it's a bad idea, I thought. You know, they make this argument, right, that we should increase the age of accessing Social Security because we're all living longer. Spoiler alert, we're not all living longer. People who work in the trades like me and my family, we're not living longer. It's white-collar workers, it's project managers who are living longer, and they want us to pay for it. There's no reason that we should increase the age of accessing Social Security just because certain kinds of workers are living longer. People that work in the trades should not be paying for that. We've got to increase solvency. One of the ways that we can do that is by removing the income tax cap and ensure that you pay the same ratio of into Social Security regardless of how much you earn.
I'd like to pause and remind the audience once again, if you cannot be quiet, you'll be asked to leave. Candidate Kent, rebuttal.
Well, people in the profession that I had for about 20 years, a lot of us didn't live to see 19 or 20 years old. So I know a thing or two about doing very hard and dangerous work. So we have a basic math problem. The baby boom generation, it's basically a reverse pyramid. There's not going to be enough of us to support them. So we can put our head in the sand and say that things are just hunky-dory and we can continue to do what we're doing right now, or we can start looking for real new solutions. That's what I'm for, is embracing reality.
The next question is from Isabel.
Immigration is one of many controversial subjects today. On one hand, some call for ending or drastically restricting immigration to the United States, while others point to the need for foreign workers, such as the H-2A visa workers, and others organized to assist asylum seekers. Name 2 specific legislative changes that you would propose to the American immigration system and why.
Candidate Perez.
You know, all countries have a right and a responsibility to know who's coming in their border. There is a crisis at the southern border that we have to address. I support comprehensive immigration reform like what Dan Newhouse, one of the Republicans in our state, has proposed. It's the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. I think that's a great step in ensuring that we can stabilize a reliable source of labor for our critical industries like agriculture. I also believe that we need to address we need to send a surge of judges down to the southern border to process the backlog of amnesty cases. If they have a valid claim of amnesty, they should come in. If not, they should not come in. We need to address this backlog. We have the resources to do that. I believe in securing our border. We can do that through enhanced electronic monitoring of the border. I don't think a wall is the right solution for that. And you know, that is one of the reasons that so many people in the agricultural industry support me, is because they know that Joe Kent's plan to end all legal immigration for 20 years is morally bankrupt and an economic sabotage.
Candidate Kent.
So 2 policies. Number 1, build the wall, get the military down there to do that, impose harsh costs on South American countries that continue to send wave after wave of illegal immigrants up here. Number 2, make it very clear to everyone who's here in the country right now, there is no pathway to citizenship if you entered this country illegally, period, full stop. What we can't do is continue to trust Joe Biden, who opened up our border for an invasion on day 1 of his presidency. We cannot continue to trust Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi to secure our border. We've had at least 2 million illegal immigrants come into this country, enough fentanyl pumped into this country and into this district to kill every American 2 times over. The number 1 killer of Americans right now, ages 15 to 50, is fentanyl, coming from our open southern border, invited by Joe Biden, being pushed by the Mexican drug cartel and the Chinese Communist Party. It is our duty to stop that. As far as economic immigration goes, look, I want to put American workers first. According to our ruling class, Republicans and Democrats, Americans are too stupid to work in STEM, so we have to import a bunch of H-1B visa workers to work in tech. Americans are too dumb and lazy to do any kind of manual labor, so we need to import them as well. So according to our ruling class, our betters, what are Americans good enough to do? Sit in their apartments, not have enough money to put down a down payment on a house or form a family? I completely and totally reject that. Our immigration system has to protect us and put our workers and our families first.
Candidate Perez, rebuttal.
You know, as somebody that is part of the American working class, it's pretty offensive for me to sit here and hear you call us stupid and lazy. You know, this is a complete failure of respect for the people that do work, that build our country, that fix things. This is an attack on the American worker, and I want to make sure everybody heard what he just said.
Brennan's question is next.
This is a question about foreign intervention. History points to instances where U.S. involvement in other countries has provided stability and improvement in people's lives. Such involvement has also led to quagmires from which the U.S. has found it difficult to remove itself. At what point does our country have a responsibility to provide support or become involved in another country? Please provide concrete examples to help us understand where you would draw these lines.
Candidate Kent.
Yeah, so this is something I spent 20 years doing for our country, getting shot at in the very much working class or the bleeding class, whatever you want to call that. So what we can't do is go get involved in foreign interventions that don't directly tie into our national security. Number 1, we have to be able to articulate what is the vital U.S. national security interest, and then members of Congress have to follow the Constitution and come back and explain it to the people in the district. That's their job, and get the consent of the people in the district. Number 1 right now, our most vital national security interest is what what I just said. It is our southern border. There's fentanyl coming across that's killing Americans. The drug cartels are pumping that in here. We have a vital national security interest right there. We do not have a vital national security interest sending billions of dollars and escalating potentially a nuclear conflict on the eastern Russian-speaking border of Ukraine. We must learn from the last 2 decades. I had a front row seat. I was there for most of it. Last 2 decades of failed foreign policy, the ways that we were lied to about Saddam Hussein having weapons of mass destruction, why we needed to do multiple regime change wars, all that exact same rhetoric being pushed by the military-industrial complex and our ruling class is being used once again. It's Congress's job to hold those leaders accountable. We need people who understand national security, foreign policy, and understand what having real skin in the game is. We don't need to listen to people who've never heard a shot fired in anger tell us all the different places that we need to go to war.
Candidate Perez.
You know, no one is talking about sending American soldiers to the Ukraine. I think it's important that we table set this. Putin invaded a sovereign, democratic nation, full stop. We should all be deeply troubled by that. You know, if Ukraine falls, Europe is in danger. And if Europe is in danger, we are in danger. There is a vital security interest in America in preventing the kind of despotism that Putin is advancing from taking over more of our world. You know, if the Ukrainians lose, they die. And there are mass graves all over Ukraine in testament to that fact. So, you know, if Canada invaded America, what part of Washington state would you all be willing to give up to appease our aggressors? The question shouldn't be how long do we stand with these people, or if we stand with them, but are we going to ensure that they have the tools necessary to end this conflict on their terms? My opponent has confused our enemies and our allies. He has called Putin reasonable, and he's called Zelensky a thug. Putin has threatened nuclear war 3 times. You cannot have it both ways. You can't be a reasonable dictator and threatening nuclear war.
Candidate Kent, rebuttal.
I spent most of my life dealing with thugs, reasonable thugs, and everything in between for the sake of the security of our country. If you just listen to all the rhetoric she just used, you can go back and listen to the exact same rhetoric being used to justify the Iraq war. We have to fight them over there so we don't fight them over here. Look, Putin can't get his tanks out of the mud in Ukraine right now. But what he does have, so he poses no threat to Europe, and we do have about a division sitting in Poland right now, and Putin is threatening nuclear war. We need sober, rational people to ensure that we don't get into a nuclear exchange with Russia.
Now a question from Lauren.
Is our democracy under threat? If so, why and what can we do about it? If not, why not?
Candidate Perez.
Our democracy is under threat. You know, we have candidates running up and down the ballot who deny our elections unless they like the outcome of it. My opponent supports abolishing mail-in voting, right? That is paper ballots are the gold standard in election security. You know, talk to anybody who does shift work about the idea of ending mail-in voting, right? The goal of our election systems are to have as many Americans participate as legally available. That's a huge problem when we have candidates calling for the restrictions of voting access. That is the foundation of our democracy. And we, you know, my opponent thinks that he's been tough on China, right? There is nothing China likes more than us clawing at each other and claiming that our elections are frauds and rigged if we don't like the outcome. He is playing right into their hand.
Candidate Kent.
There's nothing China likes more than Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi, because that's what really butters their bread. That's what it's giving them access to our country. So look, the biggest threat we have right now to our democratic republic is the fact that our economy is being absolutely decimated. We're about to lose our working class. We're about to lose our middle class. And that's because of the policies of the Democrat Party for the last 2 years having complete and total control of the government. What they've done to our energy sector, the reckless spending, the crime coming across our border, the crime on our streets here in Vancouver and throughout the district, even in the rural communities. That's what's absolutely decimating our country. Also, having leaders who just go along with whatever the current thing is, whatever the mainstream media says, or whatever is coming down from Biden and Pelosi, and not questioning it. Congress has a role in oversight. And when we have an issue like an election where a lot of people think some things went wrong, it is our job to respect those people and to say, hey, you're not an election dyer. You're not a threat to democracy. Let's adjudicate this. Let's open up the books and show the American people what happened, because this is our system. If people lose confidence in our system, we will fail to continue to exist as a country. So having Congress actually provide oversight is absolutely essential, but none of it's going to matter if we continue one-party rule in Washington, D.C., and we continue to drive our economy off the cliffs, and if our communities continue to be ripped to pieces by crime.
Candidate Perez, rebuttal.
You know, Joe Kent was one of the plaintiffs in a lawsuit against the state of Washington claiming that our elections were stolen. It was adjudicated. And you know what the courts found? That there was no basis for that. It was a huge waste of taxpayer dollars. It's a charade for gaining followers and points on the internet. You know, and it's coming at the expense of our election. These violent rioting mobs who attacked our Capitol on January 6th, he calls them political prisoners. He doesn't even think they should be prosecuted, right? That's not about having a fair system of adjudication.
Next is Philip.
This is quite a long question, so pay attention. The Columbia River is critical to the economy of the 3rd Congressional District. It supports salmon and other fisheries, transports exports and imports to the region, and it sustains communities all along its banks. As a member of Congress, which actions, if any, would you take? 1, ensure the maintenance and funding of Columbia River navigation channels and other infrastructure, including access to ports such as at Vancouver, Kalama, Longview, Laco, and Chinook. And 2, ensure sustainable and stable salmon fisheries for tribal, commercial, and recreational users.
Candidate Kent.
Yes, it's absolutely essential that we take care of our fishing industry, and so we need to be able to introduce more hatchery fish into the Columbia. We need to make sure that we don't have a conglomeration of bureaucrats from Oregon, Washington, and the federal level that are able to just shut down a fishing season. That needs to be streamlined down to the local level to ensure that our fishermen can continue to be able to make a living on the river. The ports and the freedom of navigation, that's absolutely essential. Our ports need a good deal of assistance, but our ports are really our strength. We can be an economic powerhouse because of our ports, because of our access to the Columbia River. So keeping those up and running is absolutely essential. That's a place I look forward to having a lot of bipartisan cooperation with folks on both sides of the Columbia to make sure that we remain an economic powerhouse. What we can't do is allow crazy folks like Jay Inslee and all of his Democrat allies to say they want to start ripping out dams along the Columbia River at the altar of environmentalism. That's absolute insanity. We have to prevent that. Again, push those resources down to the lowest level and ensure this green agenda doesn't destroy our economy.
Candidate Perez.
You know, at the last debate, Joe Kent said that he wouldn't support or vote for omnibus bills because they were too long to read. You know, that's how you get funding for these projects that our ports depend on. You need a bipartisan coalition. You need to, and frankly, it's a primary job of our federal electeds to ensure that our tax dollars come home and support the vital industry that drives our small businesses, our economies, our fisheries. And my opponent has pledged he won't be doing that. He wants our tax dollars to go to other states and fix their problems. That should be a huge concern to all of us. And frankly, I'm hearing from a lot of our folks that it is, because they recognize that Joe Kent can't build coalitions. He hasn't even been endorsed by the Republican federal delegation. He hasn't been endorsed by Dan Newhouse or Kathy McMorris Rodgers. He's not going to go to D.C. and suddenly find a coalition of Democrats in Oregon excited and ready to work with him. That's magical thinking. You can't annoy everyone, offend everyone, degrade everyone, and then expect them to come help you get dollars for the projects that drive our economy here in the state.
Candidate Kent, rebuttal.
So what she just said was music to corporate lobbyists' ears. She wants to go and sign massive omnibus spending bills that have gotten in this situation that we're in right now. Inflation's being driven not just by the energy policies, but by massive government spending. I won't sign off on bills that no one reads. You heard Nancy Pelosi, her speaker, say that you have to pass the bill to see what's in the bill. That's how these guys roll. I want standalone bills that are transparent to all of us that say how much these things are going to cost. I won't sign off on more reckless government spending because that that method has gotten us to this point right now.
Isabel has the next question.
Provide examples of how you would collaborate with others across the aisle. What actions would you take to reduce the political division in Congress and among your constituents?
Candidate Perez.
You know, I'm a rural Democrat that works in the trades. I'm part of the middle class. I'm pretty much an endangered species. And if we expect to take the middle back and to actually deliver benefits for our country, we've got to change what Congress looks like. We've got to start getting people in there who fix things for a living, who believe in hard work. You know, and that's the reality. Most of us agree on 90% of the stuff, but we're letting the extremists take all the oxygen out of the air and direct. It's like pulling a bull around by his nose. That's not right, because a lot of these things don't deliver measurable benefits for our constituents. What it is clickbait politics, and we've got to get away from that and build in the middle. I've been endorsed by my proudest endorsements are from Republicans who see that I'm someone who has our district's best interest in heart, I have the lived experience as a small business owner who's dealt with overregulation, who's tried to make payroll, who's tried to make taxes. Those are the experiences that matter when we're talking about getting our economy back on track, not these YouTube conspiracy theories that will only further divide our district.
Candidate Kent.
Yeah, so I look forward to working across the aisles on a wide variety of issues. Just recently, I was endorsed by the vice chair of the Democrat National Committee, Tulsi Gabbard, because she recognizes right now the political realignment within our country is anti-interventionist, preventing more foreign wars, preventing a nuclear war, bringing back our manufacturing, putting American working families first, and stopping illegal immigration and the massive amounts of fentanyl that's coming across our border, enshrining our Second Amendment. What we can't do is continue to double and triple down on the Biden and Pelosi policies. And Marie talks about being a rural Democrat from Skamania, but it's funny because the only place she'll show up is in Portland or in Vancouver. She won't show up out in Skamania and talk about these issues with people. She endorses more infringements upon our Second Amendment at a time when the Democrat crime cycle is absolutely decimating this community. She wants to take away your ability to defend yourself and acquire a firearm. So look, the problem is the Democrats continue to have this extremely radical agenda. They just don't like it when the Republicans fight back. We're going to start fighting back, but I look forward to working with folks that were part of the populist left that used to exist. The Democrats that voted against the Iraq War 20 years ago, back when old Bernie Sanders said that the open borders policy was a Koch brothers scheme. Those are the guys we need to build a broad realignment coalition with. That's where all the change is happening right now on the American political scene. I'd invite anyone to come over and join us.
Candidate Perez, rebuttal.
You know, it makes sense that Joe Kent's excited about an endorsement from Tulsi Gabbard because, you know, wannabe celebrities are a lot of his endorsers. He actually had to take his endorsements page off of his website because it was too skinny, right? So it is truly magical thinking that he's going to get to Congress and find a broad coalition of leftist populists who are excited and willing to work with him. That's just not what the world looks like.
Okay, now we are going to move to a lightning round. Each journalist will ask you a question, and you are to answer with only one word. Brennan is up first.
Yes or no, will you accept November's certified election results by the auditors of the counties in the 3rd Congressional District and Washington's Secretary of State?
Yes.
Candidate Kent.
Yes.
Lauren is next.
Do you support President Biden as the lawfully elected President of the United States?
Candidate Perez.
Yes.
Candidate Kent.
Yeah, he's there.
Philip.
Yes or no, do you support a woman's right to make her own reproductive decisions with the assistance of her health care provider?
Candidate Kent.
That's a pretty loaded question. I'm pro-life. That's not mystery.
One word.
I support a woman's right for her body.
Candidate Perez.
Yes. Unequivocally, yes.
Isabel.
Yes or no? Do you support the federal recognition of the Chinook Nation?
Candidate Perez.
That is a complex issue that we all need to learn more about.
Candidate Kent.
Yes.
And Brennan.
In one word, characterize the individuals who tried to stop the transfer of power on January 6th and who have to date been arrested and convicted.
Candidate Kent.
And convicted? Well, they're convicted of what they're convicted of.
What, generally speaking.
I guess that would make them felons.
I'm sorry?
I guess that would make them felons if we're looking
Okay,
for one
all right.
word.
Candidate Perez.
Rioters.
This brings us to the candidates' closing arguments. You each have 60 seconds. Candidate Perez.
I'm not your typical candidate for Congress. I'm a small business owner. I'm a mom. I live in rural Skamania County and I fix things for a living. I am running for Congress to put common sense and community first, to actually fix what's broken with our economy. And that's the clear choice in this election. I want to fix things. Joe Kent wants to break things. I want to build bridges. Joe Kent wants to burn bridges. I am a small business owner. Joe Kent is an extreme politician. But the bad news for Joe is that this district is not a district that sends extremists to Congress. We have a proud history of electing strong, independent voices. Jamie Herrera Butler and Brian Baird both stood up to their party when they needed to, and I will too. I will work across the aisle. I will listen. I will be accountable. I will be honest. I am honored to have the support of so many Democrats, independents, and Republicans, and I would be honored to have your vote also.
Candidate Kent.
So Marie's going to give you a lot of anecdotes about why she's a different kind of Democrat, but the thing is, she is just more of the same old Democrat. Look at her policies with inflation, not addressing the energy crisis, not addressing the spending, bragging about signing on to omnibus spending packages. Look at the crime. She didn't address crime one time. She is endorsing open borders, no border wall. She's endorsed by Democrats that are letting child killers out of prison here in the district. She supports the radical mutilation of children and the chemical castration of children known as gender-affirming care. She not only endorses it, she wants your taxpayer dollars to go to fund it. And most importantly, when she gets to Washington, D.C., she's going to vote in lockstep with Nancy Pelosi. And so the real question is, can you afford 2 more years of one-party rule? I'm going to Washington, D.C. to provide a strong check against Nancy Pelosi, against Joe Biden, and against one-party rule. I served this country for 20 years. I'd be honored to serve you for 2 more as your representative. Thank you very much.
That concludes this afternoon's debate. Special thanks to our candidates for participating in the event and to CVTV for their support in putting it together, and to everyone watching. Remember, Washington residents do not need to request a mail-in ballot. All registered voters will receive them by October 27th. You can make sure you are registered by going to votewa.gov. The deadline for registering online and by mail is October 31st, but you can register up until 8 p.m. on Election Day if you go in person to the county elections office. Thank you, and don't forget to be a voter.